Hi Magic Makers, Karolina here again, and today I would like to share my tarot journey with you and how I got into reading cards in the first place. And what I hope is that this will inspire you a little bit in case you feel self-conscious about reading cards and you don't feel confident enough, because I was in that place once as well. And if you told me 10 years ago that I would read tarot cards for people for a living, I would be like, are you crazy? What are you even talking about? So yeah, this is my story from the very beginning up till where I'm at with my cards right now. So it all started for me with my 15th birthday when I got my first tarot deck from my mum as a gift, and it was the Karolina Tarot, which is a pretty difficult and sophisticated deck to start with. But I just basically went to a bookshop one day, and because it was this like very elfish and kind of a fantasy phase of my life when I was a lot into Lord of the Rings and things like that, so I used to go into these esoteric shops and shops that had crystals and stuff like that. And one day I found the Karolina Tarot deck over there, and I just fell in love with the artwork and everything. So when my birthday came, my mom decided to buy the deck together with a huge textbook that goes hand in hand with it to me. And basically from the day that I received it, I was glued to it. I was studying the cards on everyday basis. I was doing readings every day. But you know, like, I was a teenager. I was 15, so a pretty unstable age. So I remember this vividly. This is weird. That the card that kept I'm sorry, I just can't even talk. The card that kept coming up for me was the Nine of Swords, which is pretty much like the worst card of the entire tarot deck. It symbolizes a really big ego and cruelty to the self and all those really nasty things that basically happen in your life if you're way too much in your head and you kind of forget to listen to your heart. So that was quite frustrating for me, because, you know, I was doing readings about boys and all these different things, like what should I do in order to make this boy like me more. So eventually I gave up tarot altogether, because at some point I just got too frustrated and I decided this is not for me. This is just, you know, repetitive. The same cards keep coming up all the time. I don't understand what they're trying to tell me. This whole thing is too complicated anyways. I just give up. And actually it wasn't until about 8 years later in 2009 that I finally decided to enroll for a tarot reading course, after having so many doubts, because my head was going like, you are not really gonna do this, are you? Like, this is just weird, you know, this is all just woo-woo and all this like fortune-telling witchcraft crap, like it's not gonna work, and you don't even have any superpowers, so you're not a psychic, like what are you gonna do in the class? But eventually the inner need of actually going for this and giving it a go was fortunately stronger than my head, because it has actually been a while that I was thinking about enrolling into a tarot reading course. And honestly, this, like the signing up for the course, was one of the best decisions in my life. I am certain about it, because it has sparked and kickstarted so many amazing things in my life. That was the whole reason why I got into self-development in the first place, for example, and then eventually it all led into my coaching training, and you know, it just basically, that was the beginning and the birth of like spirituality in my life. It's also a great example of what magic can come out of when you actually listen to your heart and forget about the mind chat for a second. But I was super lucky, because my teacher was this super wise spiritual woman that actually approached tarot in a very intuitive way. So we did learn about the different meanings of each and every individual card, but what she mainly focused on was, how do you feel about this? What does it evoke within you in your current situation? So basically everything that I teach now as well. I was in my early 20s at that time, and it was the first time in my life that I actually had the opportunity to sit down and think consciously about different issues and problems that I was going through at the time, because it was a pretty rough time in my life. That was probably the reason why I took the course in the first place. And the gift that this course has given me was that I realized that, well, I don't actually need any superpowers. I kind of already have a superpower, and it's called my intuition. But it was kind of the beginning still, because I had a grasp of the cards and how to read them for myself, but I was still miles and miles away from reading for other people, because that's a whole different level. I was mostly reading for myself, and I never thought I could do readings professionally. Shortly after I finished the beginner's course, I moved to the UK because I went to study there, but I wanted to continue with tarot. And at the time, the only possibility to keep working with my teacher was a remote tarot course. So yeah, I kept going with advanced stuff, basically through emails, which looking back was really important as well, because this has kind of crushed the myth within me that in order to make readings work, you gotta be physically present with the client or with whoever you are doing the readings for, otherwise it's not gonna work. Well, it showed out that you don't have to be physically present with another person, and that actually tarot readings can work remotely or without even knowing the person in the first place. Now obviously this very much depends on your individual beliefs and set of values that you have around tarot, but for me personally, I think this was the basis of the no rule policy, where I feel like there are really no rules around tarot. Like, you just can have fun with it, and whatever works for you works, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to follow anybody else's guidelines if it doesn't suit you. In the UK, I also started doing my first readings for people that weren't necessarily my best friends or people that I have known for my entire life, right? So that was a big step out of my comfort zone, where I needed to really get confident with doing readings for people I didn't necessarily know. Because, you know, when you're reading for someone you know really well, it can be easier. Actually, sometimes can be much more difficult because of that, but it can be easier to interpret the cards because you have a context for the whole situation. It's not like you have just a fragment and a piece of the story they are telling you, but you have the context of the rest of their lives. So this has really pushed me to go down and deeper into my intuition and try to dig as much as possible out of it without having any additional and extra information whatsoever. My first paid client reading ever was in Prague a couple of years later, and it was so scary, I'm telling you. I was like, 5 minutes before I was about to meet this guy, I was like, I'm not going there. I'm just gonna run away because I have no idea what I'm gonna tell this man. Like, I don't know him and I feel so self-conscious. Oh my god, what am I doing? I was so nervous and I felt like, who am I kidding here? What am I even doing? I'm not a tarot reader? Like, this is ridiculous. What are you doing, Karolina? But in the end, it turned out to be awesome, and I felt like, huh, you know what? This is real fun, and I get like a real buzz out of it, and it feels super good to actually help out somebody and to get a great feedback. And so this experience has sparked a completely new dimension for me again and opened new doors for me, because that was the experience where I felt like, even though I had no confidence whatsoever, I can totally do this. Yeah, but then right after I started my own business back in Prague, and before I could really develop it into a fully working practice, I moved to Australia to be with my husband. At the time, I already had my coaching certification, so I was trying to establish myself as a coach. But eventually, after working with many clients, I realized that I don't actually like this approach that much, because it's very much goal-oriented and very brain-based again. And I found myself blending my intuitive tarot background into it more and more. And eventually I got into this point where I was like, why don't I use the cards more? Why don't I blend everything I know together and make it into something new that makes more sense to me and seems to make more sense to my clients as well. And this is how Tarot Alchemy was born, which is my fancy way of saying that the way how I work with people today is based on my intuition and intuitive work and empathy with them, and then it's backed up with practical exercises that you can apply right now that are based in coaching. And then another major thing happened, which is probably how you found me, and that was that I decided to make my first YouTube video. I was in the early stages of pregnancy with Josefina at the time, and I don't know, I just felt creative and I felt like it would be fun to try this new thing, to make a video. And so the first tarot YouTube video that I have ever created was called How Do Tarot Cards Actually Work, and you will find it here linked in the cards. And then the second, and actually my most popular and most viewed video, was Where Do I Begin? 5 baby steps for complete tarot beginners, which you will find over here. I had no expectation when I was creating these videos. I thought, you know, if my friends watch it and they like it, it's good enough for me. I never thought in a billion years again that more than like 100 people would ever view this. So the fact that the 5 baby steps video has over 100k views, and that I am now making a video on your request, is like absolute mind blown and magic to me. And it's another proof of that stuff that you would never expect or foresee happens on everyday basis. And you know, if you have any fears and stuff that's holding you back because you feel like you can't do this, you don't have what it takes to be a good tarot reader, just forget about it. Like, try to abandon the intention of becoming someone or being successful. Just do it because it's fun. So today, how I use tarot cards in my personal life, it's mostly when I need to make some kind of a decision, I have some kind of a dilemma, or I want to look deeper into a challenge or situation that I'm facing. But to be honest, it's not as often as it might seem. So it might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I actually do more readings for others than for myself at the moment. And so what I do right now is I do Monday oracle readings for my Czech community on my Facebook page. Then I do the regular new moon readings in both Czech and English, which you can always find on my YouTube channel. Then this year I created the Tarot Playground for Beginners e-course, which you can find the link for below or in the end screen of this video. And in terms of individual readings, I now do audio readings, which you can find the link to over here. I also thought I should tell you a little bit about how I actually work with the cards, how it works in my brain, so to speak, because there has also been an evolution. So today how I work is that I take the information I've got from a client about their challenge or situation that they want to look at, and then I take the cards and I look at the cards, I feel into them, into the colors, into the images, into the general vibe of the spread as a whole, and I don't know, somehow naturally I start piecing it together with whatever they told me. And then when I do the reading, let it be a face-to-face reading or the audio reading, I actually do something that's almost like channeling. There are just words and sentences that appear somewhere in my head and I just say them. And if I have to track it back, I don't even know how I got into all those ideas. So sometimes it's a bit weird because when I look at it, when I listen back to myself or whatever, I'm like, ah, have I really said that? That's really super wise. Where did that come from? Of course, it took time to fully trust my intuition, especially in those situations where you are not really sure whether whatever you are feeling or about to say will resonate with the client. But my overall experience is that anytime I went with my intuition, despite this fear, I was always spot on. And this needs a little bit of practice, but I really encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and maybe try with your friends and people you trust first, so that you can really see in a safe environment that it does work, that you can trust your heart and your intuition. Challenge the inner skeletons in the closet of yours and all those fears and the mind chat that's running through your head and that's discouraging you from going with what your whole body is telling you is gonna be exciting and good for you. And be compassionate with yourself, because it is hard to beat all these inner fears, and there is also a lot of judgment from the mainstream about tarot cards, and people have a lot of misconceptions about it. So it's completely understandable if you feel a bit unsafe and a bit unsure about the whole thing. Practice and exercise your skills in a safe environment with people you like and with people that like you and that you know will not gonna put you down just because something is not spot on, and they will give you the freedom to exercise and make mistakes and get more and more confident with your readings every day. So I hope you enjoyed this video, that it was meaningful to you. Let me know in the comments what your journey is, where you are at right now with your cards, what are maybe your biggest fears or blockages, or what are the ones that you have already surpassed and how did that feel to you. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!